My name's Ethan Polar, and today the topic I chose to present about is holding patterns and procedures. So, what is a hold? Somebody might ask. A hold is basically the FAA's way of having an airplane pull over and wait. It's obviously in an airplane, you can't just stop, you drop out of the sky. So, the FAA has come up with holds to kind of hold an airplane in one general area, and they've protected that area, the airspace around it's pretty much protected. So an airplane's safe to just kind of hold right there and wait for further clearance or whatever might be. You might encounter a hold if you're flying an approach when maybe you caught a really good tailwind and you're early to your destination and ATC's not ready for you to go in, or the airport's not ready to bring you in yet. So you sit out there to that hold until the time that you were originally supposed to be there. Or maybe you hit a big headwind and you came in late past the time that you expected. So ATC puts you in the hold because they're trying to work you back into their pattern because they've got more airplanes coming in or whatever it might be. Or in some cases, you hold for weather. Say that weather over the airport isn't good for landing or isn't to the minimums of the approach. So you got to hold right there and wait for the weather to get better. I know personally I've experienced that. Not as a pilot, but as a passenger. I was flying back into Tampa one day, and we got down and we hit the published minimum, and we went back up, and then we kind of sat in the sky and kept holding, and finally we went back in, and the weather was clear. You'll find a hold on your approach plate on whatever approach that you're shooting. It'll be on your approach plate. It'll tell you where the hold is and what side, if it's a standard or non-standard. And the difference between a standard and non-standard is, for a standard hold, you make right turns and you have 1 minute legs. Sometimes on a holding procedure, it'll say on the approach plate, maybe not 1 minute, but they want you to fly out a certain amount of miles, but that'll be set on your approach plate. Or on an approach plate, it might say non-standard, and non-standard hold is where you just turn to it's left turns and it's still 1 minute, but it's left turns instead of right. So how to fly a hold. They're kind of tricky when you first start learning to fly. I know when I physically got in the airplane and started flying, it wasn't very hard for me, but on paper it seemed kind of tricky. There's a lot of things for a pilot to consider when he flies a hold. One thing to consider is how you're going to enter the hold. There's 3 different ways to enter a hold. You have parallel entry, teardrop entry, and direct entry, and we'll kind of get into that more in just a minute. Another thing to consider is how fast you're going and at what altitude you're at, because there are airspeed restrictions at certain altitudes, which I'll touch on a little bit later. And finally, the last thing to consider is wind. You consider the wind once you get in the hold. You sometimes you want that 1 minute leg to be inbound, so it doesn't matter how long your outbound leg is. Say there's a headwind going outbound and you only fly the outbound leg, or excuse me, there's a tailwind going outbound, so you only fly that for 30 seconds, but then you got that headwind coming back inbound, and your 30-second outbound leg, make sure you hit a 1 minute inbound leg. So that's something for a pilot to consider when he's in a hold. So the entries, a teardrop entry is when the aircraft is approaching from anywhere in section B here. The aircraft will approach the fix, fly over the fix, turn about 30 degrees to the right, fly for the outbound leg time or miles. So 1 minute if it's just a regular hold, or if it has a certain amount of miles, you'll fly that miles. Once you get to that point, the 1 minute or the set amount of miles, then you're going to start your standard rate turn back in to intercept that inbound leg and fly in on the approach. Sometimes they'll use this, they'll call it a hold in lieu of a procedure turn, so you'll just make that turn and you'll go in, or that's how you're going to enter the hold, and once you get back to the fix, and you're going to enter the hold and just do the hold until whenever you're supposed to. A parallel entry is kind of the same as a teardrop, just a little bit backwards though. It's going to be anywhere from area A, over here, you're going to enter from area A. Once you cross the approach, or the holding fix right here, you're going to turn to the outbound heading, and you'll fly that heading for 1 minute, or for the amount of miles you're supposed to, which is on the published approach plate. Fly that. Once you get to that time, that amount of miles, and you're going to make a standard rate turn to the left, and you come back in and intercept that inbound leg. And then again, you'll use that as just your procedure turn and fly inbound, or you'll enter the hold and then start your hold then. A direct entry is when a pilot is entering the hold from anywhere in area C. It's the easiest entry for a pilot to do. You just fly straight to the holding fix, and then you'll start your hold. And there's really nothing to consider, or nothing really you have to follow. You just, like I said, fly to that fix, and that's how you're going to start your hold. It's the easiest entry procedure for pilots to do into a hold. Airspeed restrictions say that The FAA issues these restrictions to for bigger, faster aircraft, keeps everybody separated, and that way they can have peace of mind knowing that when you're in the hold, nothing's going to be interfered. From 0 to 6,000 feet, you got to be less than 200 knots. From 6,001 feet to 14,000 feet, you got to be less than 230 knots. And from 14,001 feet and above, you got to be less than 265 knots. The only exceptions to these restrictions are when you're in a non-standard hold, and these restrictions will be published on the non-standard hold on the approach plate. Reporting, there's no specific reporting criteria except for the FAA does want you to report when you're in a non-radar environment, report when you enter the hold and when you exit a hold, just so they have a heads up of where you are and what you're doing. Now, when you're in a radar environment, there's no published reporting criteria from ATC. Most of the time, the things that I've encountered they'll tell you something like report when your procedure turn inbound, or report when you make that inbound turn or whatever, just so they have a heads up of where you are and what you're doing. The AIM says it's a good idea to report your position and altitude when you enter a hold. Just kind of give ATC a heads up of where you are, and then let them know you're entering the hold. And if you haven't gotten a further clearance, you're waiting until that expected further clearance time. It kind of gives them a reminder, hey, this guy needs a clearance. So in conclusion, holds are overall pretty easy to fly. It's a very easy way of ATC kind of keeping you in one spot and holding you there, because like I said, obviously we all know that you can't just stop when you're in the air, but sometimes you got to wait on traffic or weather. So it's the easiest way for ATC to keep you in one area and have you wait until it's safe to continue into the airport. So this is holds and how you fly them. And this is my works cited page from the website. And